Keir Starmer is only going down this route. He's very, very weak, very, very weak, a very, very fragile government. He's under pressure from people like Wes Streeting, who want to move in a more pro-European direction. And the only reason we're having this discussion with huge consequences for British sovereignty and actually for the economy down the road is literally because of an internal problem that Keir Starmer has in his cabinet. The idea you'd want to suck up to the European Union, which really does look like a busted flush, is simply bizarre.
Hello, I'm Fraser Myers. Happy New Year. I am delighted to be joined by Bruno Waterfield, Brussels correspondent at The Times. Hi, Bruno. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Bruno, there is no one I'd rather talk to about Keir Starmer's Brexit reset. People will be well aware that Keir Starmer is trying to negotiate a new deal with the EU. His team are desperate to downplay some of the implications. They say it's nonsense that this is a giveaway of British sovereignty. But already we're aware that powers are being transferred from our own parliament to potentially the European Commission and even overseen by the European Courts of Justice. How can this be anything other than an attack on British sovereignty?
The government would argue it's a trade-off. The government would argue, that, for example, the easing border controls on food and animal products will benefit the economy. The trade-off for that is superior to what you lose in terms of sovereignty. It will be a very real loss of sovereignty. Britain will have to change legislation. It will have to change post-Brexit legislation on the authorization of gene-edited crops, for example. It will actually have to almost certainly go back on regulations authorizing crop protection. That's pesticides. So it will have some immediate consequences. Taking that legislation out of Parliament, it is legislation, it's an act on gene editing, will be a little bit politically awkward because it will be obvious. Over time, you do obviously get a bit of a problem because you do totally lose control of quite important elements of managing food, what we eat, what's put on the table, how and what our farmers, British farmers, are allowed to do. And over time, that will become significant. You also have to bear in mind the fact that Britain will not be part of drawing up those regulations. So could be an interest in, say, for example, the French or the Italians, who are very robust in sticking up for their own agricultural sectors, to perhaps stick up for their farmers and do down British farmers. That could well happen. So over time, there will be problems with dynamic alignment, as they call it, with just taking, with the EU holding the pen on what is actually quite an important area of legislation. That's just on the SPS. Then you've got the whole energy question. I think that's, in some ways, that's not as direct as the food standards. But again, on energy, that has really big problems. And the really bigger problem, actually, about the loss of sovereignty is a sort of more ingrained evasion, which is that it will become a substitute for Britain doing all the things it needs to do to regain energy security, to push prices down, because prices are going up. They're rocketing up, actually, for electricity, particularly for industry, because there are measures to protect house quality. It will become an evasion for doing what actually Britain needs to do. It'll actually help the Europeans evade those questions. So countries like Belgium and Germany really have got to get to grips with energy prices as well. And no doubt they will use this as a way of sort of wriggling off the hook of accountability.
Yeah, because it does strike me that, these are areas where the EU itself has major problems. I mean, if you think about food and farming, we had years of farmers' revolts, blocking roads, turning up in Brussels with their tractors. Or if you think about energy, Europe suffers from similarly high energy prices to the UK. So what is it that is drawing the Labour government to these policies or locking ourselves into this system when clearly it doesn't seem to be benefiting Europe. Why would it benefit us?
Well, I think, look, food prices in Britain are substantially less than in most parts of Western Europe. I mean, Britain actually has the same kind of food prices as Central Europe. And the really big underlying factor for lower British food prices is the fact that Britain has zero-rated VAT on food, not for restaurants, but for food you buy in supermarkets. That is very substantial. If the sort of Wes Streeting, David Lammy fantasy of a customs union materialised with the EU, I can't really see that anyone in the EU particularly would want to do it. That could mean the end of those zero rating on for VAT on food. Certainly a big battle over it. I can't think of a bigger threat to food prices in Britain than the prospect of suddenly being hit with 7 to 20% or 21% levy. So there's a high, there's a lot of dishonesty, if not downright misleading, lies even, that sort of enter into this discussion. I mean, and Labour are doing it all for the worst of all possible reasons. Keir Starmer is only going down this route because he's very, very weak, a very, very fragile government. He's under pressure. He's under pressure from people like Wes Streeting, who want to move in a more pro-European direction. And that's the only reason why we're having this discussion. The only reason we're having this discussion with huge consequences for British sovereignty and actually for the economy down the road is literally because of an internal problem that Keir Starmer has in his cabinet and the need to, fight off Wes Streeting for the Labour Party leadership. They have very, very poor grounds. I think most people would agree to take really, really important decisions that would cost a lot politically, be very difficult to undo again. They would effectively bind the hands of future parliaments down the road. So big decisions with big impacts are being driven by the Labour's febrile internal politics and a sort of anti-beauty contest between the very unappealing Sir Keir Starmer and the equally unappealing Wes Streeting. It's an absolutely bizarre foundation to take really important decisions. And we just saw a budget which had lots of very unpleasant news for schools, lots of very unpleasant news for public services, some of which communities actually value. And because of this beauty contest between Wes Streeting, David Lammy, Sir Keir et al., they've decided a few weeks ago to splurge £570 million on a student exchange program that, based on certainly the past, benefits a tiny amount of middle class and European, not even British, university students.
That's the Erasmus scheme that they've just signed us up to, and it just seemed like, in general, even if just as a deal in and of itself, it seems that Britain is getting a bad deal. Not just the amount we're spending on Erasmus, but previously last year, Keir Starmer agreed to sign away fishing rights for 12 years, when I think that previously it had been discussed in the original Brexit agreement, this would be something discussed annually. It does feel like Britain is giving away a lot for not very much in exchange, just on those raw kind of material terms.
Yeah, I mean, look, the European Union isn't particularly interested in. The European Union is fairly content with the status quo. It's the Labour government that's very anxious about it. The Labour government's very needy. I mean, they're a needy lot. And the not being entirely stupid and being pretty transactional, hard-nosed negotiators are going to extract as much from Britain as they can. A lot of that will be cash. A lot of it will be access to natural resources such as fishing, which are actually under pressure. One of the good dividends of Brexit was Britain being able to legislate marine protection measures that really are needed. I mean, it's quite important that these resources are husbanded carefully. And if you look at the latest fishing deal, the 2026 that they did a couple of weeks ago here in Brussels, they're going to continue fishing in areas where really there should probably be a moratorium on fishing, but the EU certainly doesn't want that. I mean, the EU is very happy to fish in British waters and to, perhaps fish unsustainably because it's not their resources after all.
And of course, we had the Brexit vote itself. It's coming up to 10 years to the anniversary. We left the EU officially, I think, in end of 2020. Um, the EU is actually a different beast slightly to when we left it. In many ways, it's more restrictive than it was before. You think about things like the Digital Services Act having an impact on free speech. Net zero is very much bound up in EU law in a way that it might not have been previously, or in a way that we might not have understood previously. Isn't rejoining the EU or getting closer to the EU actually a much worse proposition than it was when we had the Brexit debate originally?
Yeah, look, I think the EU certainly has its problems. It's certainly not an area of high economic growth. This idea that there's some kind of huge growth dividend from getting closer to the EU doesn't seem to be borne out looking at the economic performance of most European countries, Germany particularly. There are, the debate about the Digital Services Act is controversial, but there are similar debates in the UK to net zero. Again, very similar debates actually in European countries and across the EU about whether a lot of those targets which were taken, in a sort of frenzy of virtue signaling without really thinking about how you actually get there and the kind of impacts you might have on people's living standards, even the literal material of the houses in which they live, just simply weren't thought about. So again, they're having to rethink those things. But so none of it is actually particularly appealing. The EU is not astride the world like a colossus. The EU still hasn't done all the things that people have been talking about it needs to do, or the pro-Europeans have been talking about what it needs to do for the last 10 or 15 years. Quite often they used to use the fact that Britain was in the EU as an excuse. But the fact that these things, very important things, these very important measures and steps, new treaties weren't taken, they haven't got that excuse. Anymore. If Britain was to rejoin the European Union, it would be at a level of much, much higher budget contributions. For example, billions and billions, because the EU, since Britain left, has gone on a splurge of common borrowing since 2021 without agreeing, borrowing money on the markets, issuing euro bonds on the international money markets without even having decided how to pay it back. That's the way the EU does things. It does things without really thinking about the consequences of it. If Britain was to join, if Britain was to sign up to a customs union with the EU, should the EU want it, that would mean, for example, that all the trade deals that Britain has done over the last 10 years, or started talking with other countries about over the last 10 years, would all instantly vaporize and instantly be null and void. So it's actually quite difficult to really, if you look at the EU, it's actually quite difficult to think of reasons why you would want to cozy up to it. And in terms of European security, and where there is a need for Europeans to have a really frank and full discussion about the future and what it is to defend the societies in which we live, that debate, the EU simply isn't a vehicle for that discussion. It doesn't even look as if European leaders are up to having that debate themselves either. And again, it's going to be a big issue, not just for people in Britain, but a big issue for people across Europe. European politics continues to be on the move as well. The sort of so-called centrist groupthink that has dominated the European status quo for the last 20 years is very much cracked. It's become very sclerotic because it's so politically weak. And politics, really is on the move from Germany to France to Italy. Look at Giorgia Meloni, a Eurosceptic populist prime minister whose existence would have been, absolutely incredible 10 or 15 years ago. So the EU really is changing. In some ways, it's changed as Britain has changed. But the idea you'd want to suck up to the European Union, which really does look like a kind of a busted flush, while not building deeper and more sort of timely, I guess, or more relevant links with key European countries, to me is simply bizarre. And again, it's just a backward-looking reflex to go back to something that used to be easy. And it really does show, particularly among the British elites and the castes that occupy the commanding heights of the British state apparatus. It really shows that they've got absolutely, nothing going from them. They've got no visions, they've got no ideas, and the future, they're just looking backwards.
Yeah, and you mentioned politics being on the move in Europe, and I guess my final question to you is obviously, Brexit Britain is not the only country chafing against the EU, chafing against the status quo, chafing against the technocratic mode of politics. Is there a bit of hope that some new thinking might revive Europe a little bit, that might, return Europe to maybe perhaps some economic growth, perhaps return some freedom to Europe that might have been missing in recent years? What's your take on that, on that kind of movement?
Well, I think politics is on the move. It's very clear that millions, tens of millions of voters across Europe are shopping. They're shopping for new ideas. They're looking at to parties that were once really on the margins of politics. That can sometimes be a bit of a mixed bag for obvious reasons. But one of but the fact that people are looking around, the fact that politics is on the move, the fact that people have really realized that it's up to them to raise social questions that have gone quite often unanswered for decades. Quite often when they have been raised, people have been, such as for migration discussion, people have been accused of being racist. The fact that people see that as something they can do themselves, I think, is quite positive. And the other thing that I think is just really significant in Britain too is this is a discussion which is always about voting. And it's absolutely brand new in European politics. It's a bit less so in Britain for some positive historical reasons, but it's quite something in Europe where the challenge to the establishment is actually people wanting to use their votes. It's not paramilitaries, it's not Stalinist parties, it's not fascists. It's people wanting to use their votes. It's a civic populace wanting to be in control. And that's actually a really positive historical movement. So that's the paradox, isn't it? The EU stands against that in many ways and is estranged from it. So why cozy up to the EU? We want to somehow find ways we can, Britain, be part of that sort of international moment where societies are confronting the difficulties that they face. And they're confronting that with free speech and with democracy. We'd want to be part of that, but I'm not sure we want to be part of a failed groupthink that stumbles from one disaster to another disaster and seems totally incapable of taking any decisions, let alone decisions that really need to be taken.
Bruno Waterfield, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks very much for having me. Speak soon.